Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to address the issue of our embarrassment of a mainstream media again. There is a front page of what is considered a reasonably serious newspaper today that just highlights the complete lack of a serious free press in the UK. And it may seem trivial, but there's a really serious point that yes, there are outlets that are genuinely serious, but they don't have such wide circulation. What we have are basically adult comics. If the front page of a national newspaper, which isn't the Daily Star, would actually have people thinking it's a spoof, when I show you it, you'll think, it's a spoof. It's not. And you know that in that situation, the country's not quite right. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'll discuss some wider issues in a moment. Let's get straight to it, shall we? This is the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning. With the cost of living crisis deepening, the NHS winter crisis being worse than ever, COVID cases massively on the rise, a senior member of the government producing ever more damaging revelations for the Conservatives, and even a former Prime Minister getting ready to explain himself in a serious parliamentary inquiry. What does the Daily Telegraph lead with? Two people who've strapped a printed photo of someone else's face to their own and sat in a bath. This has been seriously proposed as absolute proof that the Duke of York could not have had sex in said bath by photographing two different people in that bath not even attempting to have sex. I'm not even going to get into how ridiculous the feeble defence even is. Anyone who's actually had sex in a bath will look at the photo and think, do you know what? Our bath's no bigger than that and we managed it. It's irrelevant. The photo has been produced by someone who is a candy floss short of a carnival. It's the fact that one of our major newspapers has decided to not just post it as news, front page news. Not in the middle, as some sort of light relief as readers transition from the news to entertainment and sport. No, the front page. Consider some of the other stories that would have been on the editors' desks and that some outlets went with. HMRC has admitted that it misled the public, basically lied, when it denied that any ministers were under investigation over their taxes, when there was a very senior minister under investigation at the time. Took a tabloid to report on the huge profits that oil companies have been making as the government increases the tax burden of ordinary people facing a cost of living crisis. No, we'll dedicate half the front page to two people sat in a bath with photos of two other people strapped to their faces. Massive photo. The photo's all important. Make sure it's really big. I mean, can you imagine a judge taking such evidence seriously if counsel were to present it to court? Of course not. And yet there are multiple problems here. First of all, I would view any newspaper putting anything close to royal news on the front page right now as deliberately trying to distract the public from real news, because that's what they do. And it doesn't matter whether it's Andrew or Harry. When the coronation's on, okay, you can have a few days for that. What we'll get is far longer, I suspect, but you could justify a few days to report on it. People will actually be interested, whether it's right to be interested or not. But anything at all on these matters right now is not news that should be on the front page. But so much of our media doesn't aim to inform the public, but to disinform them. But then there's the particular angle. So if what they were reporting was actual news, just way down in priority, then I would still criticise its prominence, given the much more serious issues going on right now. But it would still be news at least. But this isn't news. This is beyond childish. You show anyone this photo and they're going to think it's a spoof. I'll be honest, I did too. When I saw this before I had and I just thought, yeah, funny. Because it happens, people do spoof front page headlines, usually for the Daily Mail or the Sun. But, this one I thought, yeah, funny. But then I was scanning through, as I often do in the morning, the front pages of the newspapers on the BBC News, where, of course, it gets wider circulation. But no, it's real. It's there. And this must appear hilarious to people outside the UK. Another source of ridicule for what was once a respected nation, at least amongst its peers. But when you're living here and you're as interested in public and political affairs as I am, it's actually deeply frustrating. Our news media is completely unfit for purpose. I'm not necessarily saying that the media in any country is necessarily brilliant. Maybe it is in some. But here it's just out of whack completely with public interest. Take the latest entries to the television media. We've long bemoaned the bias of the BBC. It was bad enough when it was regional bias. It was not intentional. Regional bias, which they thought they were addressing by having regional outlets. Well, we'll have BBC Scotland, we'll have BBC in the north of England, we'll have BBC here. And they can cover your regional issues. But that didn't stop the London-centric bias in their national output. But for some years, the Conservatives have worked to get openly prejudiced figures into key positions whereby there is now institutional party political bias in the BBC. But then you just look at the latest ones. GB News, Talk TV, they're not even trying to pretend, are they? No pretense at all. It's not just that they don't put Conservatives properly under the spotlight. They actually invite them to lead their discussions. Nadine Dorries and Jacob Rees-Mogg have taken up positions as actual presenters while still in office. Now, I'm never really in favour of that. I wasn't in favour of LBC using Rees-Mogg or David Lammy to front programmes. It's good to have them on regularly. They're going to take the time to be there to answer questions of the public. That's good. And it wasn't that bad on LBC, you can argue, because they're taking calls from the public. So you could argue it's more like a public interview. So that's on the lower end of... Even then, I'd still want someone objective to run the things, to actually chair it effectively. To be devil's advocate at the very least. And I was too young to be aware, but I would have felt funny at least about the former Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson fronting his own talk show. He ran his own talk show. But he had at least left office. And a talk show is more light entertainment than hard political news. So, not as bad. Fortunately, he was absolutely terrible at it, by the way, so he didn't last. But getting sitting MPs... And on the government benches, people who are actually influencing government decisions to front political discussions, as Dorries and Rees-Mogg are, and they're not fielding calls from the public, they're actually just running the discussions. Or when they write front page articles, as Boris Johnson did last week, or, that is an attack on properly informed political and public discourse. Conservatives like to say they're defenders of free speech. This is the opposite. These people, whether intentionally or not, are going to act as political filters to every discussion they preside over because of their strongly held views. It won't help that they're only going to interview people who agree with them anyway. I wouldn't trust myself to lead such a discussion really objectively. I would try very hard to be objective. But I am party political, I'm aware of that. Our political system is just utterly broken. As a result, that broken political system broke our national infrastructure. And people will blame the politicians. And in a sense, that's fine. The politicians are largely responsible, of course. But the very politicians who caused the damage willingly could never have achieved their high office without the complicit efforts of the national media. A genuine free press speaking truth to power would have informed the public properly. They'd never have supported these charlatans at the ballot box then. It would have been impossible for you think about everything that's gone wrong, particularly over the last 10 years. Wouldn't have been possible. Austerity, they'd have never gotten away with it. Brexit, they'd have never gotten away with it. If I could just fix one thing in this country, wouldn't actually be part of the political system. I'm massively in favour of introducing full proportional representation. It's actually what I say is my top realistic policy priority. But I would actually accept first past the post. I'd accept the scrutinising chamber being stuffed full of political appointments for political reasons. If only we had a media who were fiercely determined to report in the public interest. There would still be differences of opinion. There'd be unconscious bias in it. You can't help that. But if they were consciously trying to report in the public interest, not to mislead, but to inform, not to persuade, inform, to lay out the facts, to present arguments and counter-arguments in a way that makes it clear what is opinion, what is fact, and what is delusional nonsense. Because if we had that, although our parliament wouldn't be truly representative, it would at least be full of MPs focusing on the public good, because that would be what gets them elected next time. Because if they did not, the media would shine a harsh spotlight on them. If they try feathering their own nest, the media would point it out. And although the Lords, yes, would still be full of political appointments, it wouldn't be stuffed with the unsuitable cronies, the unfriendly foreign agents, and people who just paid for their seats. Because the media would shine a harsh spotlight on that as well, and on the sort of people facilitating it. And it would be far too bright to survive long enough in office to climb the ladder to such heights that you could engage in that corruption. If we could just fix the media, everything else would fall into line much more easily. And then we could one day see news headlines presenting the news instead of the deranged attempts to prove that it's not possible to have sex in a bath by taking a photo of two people easily fitting into that bath. But there we are, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.